Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. We live in a world which is in the midst of great upheaval. That much is obvious to everyone who has their eyes open. Nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. We lived through over 2 years of a pandemic which overturned much of what we believed to be stable and constant in our lives, only to find out that with its apparent end, nothing is going back to the way that it was. This again is no great surprise to anyone who was up on the trends before the pandemic, but it still comes as a shock when we see it in the flesh. It would have been virtually impossible for anyone to have predicted at the turn of the 21st century that something as fundamental as the distinction between the male and female sexes would be considered obsolete and downright bigoted 20 years later. But such is the world we live in. For somebody to openly and publicly challenge this new standard of truth means running the risk of career loss, reputation down the tubes, and who knows what else. We don't know what the next society-rocking revelation will be, but we do know that there will be others that are equally earth-shaking coming down the pipeline pretty soon. It is not easy to say what things are still sacred and untouchable in our world. The unique status of human beings among life forms is long gone. So are almost all previous notions of basic morality. We can never be sure if anything we had deemed as good or correct for virtually our entire lives is still so or will remain so in the near future. We don't even know if the idea of a stable mental state and a properly thinking mind will survive as a necessary feature of proper human existence. With the way cultural extremes are taking over everything, it is anybody's guess whether madness or perpetual drug high will be considered the new normal and all else deemed passé or primitive. All the old religious values are scarcely mentionable in today's world. Try boosting the 10 Commandments as the basis of all social stability and see where it gets you. Expressing belief in God is a virtual guarantee to get you labeled as a bigoted nut who still hasn't adjusted to the ultimate truths of science. Even something as basic as stealing is now touted as a justifiable necessity that is entirely excusable to right previous wrongs. The family as a stabilizing institution is clearly on its way out, as are any prior ideas about sex and love. We don't know where any of this is going, but we do know that it is going somewhere very different from where we are now. So what is sacred? What inherent values or cultural norms will still be around 20 years from now? Does anybody know? Will pedophilia still be taboo? Will rape? Will war be a virtue or a vice? Will anybody be able to think on their own without assistance from some outside source? Will anybody believe in God? We don't know, but we can guess. Of course, everybody's guess is of equal value, being as nobody really knows. We can be reasonably sure that some sort of computerized devices will dominate our lives and penetrate to our most personal depths. Based on this, we have to assume that some level of sameness and uniformity will permeate the thinking of everyone. If anything we can predict, it is this: that basic human uniqueness and individuality is a thing of the past. This entire notion that people are inherently different from each other and that this is a good thing is probably going out the proverbial window. Will anything be left of that grand old world we grew up in and thought would last forever? This week's Parsha is called Re'eh. That word means see, as in look and see what's out there. It introduces a paragraph that points out a blessing and a curse that rest on the spiritual and historical horizon of the Israelites as they were about to enter the Promised Land after journeying on its borders for the past 40 years. They were told that both blessing and curse were lying before them, with each being a well-defined path that they could choose for themselves. Blessing would come if they followed the laws of God, and curse would come if they didn't. It was as simple as that. It was obvious which path they should choose, and it would seem obvious that they did indeed choose this path. History, in fact, shows otherwise. This is one of the odd quirks of the Bible. It points out the glaring spiritual failures of those who should have known better. From there, it goes into a long series of laws that describe and circumscribe the goals and limitations of what would become the biblical Israelite society. These include the laws of what can and cannot be eaten, the kosher laws. They also include the annual arrangement of the calendar, highlighted by the pilgrimage festivals of the holidays. It also includes a section warning about venturing into foreign cultures and beliefs, with highly strict punishments for those who enter these forbidden waters. The idea of having a central place of worship to the apparent exclusion of all else is laid out for what may be the first time in the Torah. This restriction would prove to be critical in the long-term stability of biblical Israel and a major contributor to its ultimate demise. In the middle of all this is an easily missed couple of verses that have no apparent connection to all the laws, or even anything else contained in this long parsha. In fact, they seem to come out of nowhere and don't lead into anything else coming later. Quote, "You are children of HaShem your God. Do not mutilate yourselves, and do not make a bald patch in the middle of your head as a sign of mourning. You are a nation consecrated to HaShem your God, and HaShem has chosen you from all nations on the face of the earth to be his own special nation." Why this dramatic description is associated with this odd law about making bald spots as a sign of mourning is left entirely unclear. Let us ignore that entire side of these verses, since they don't seem to fit in any way whatsoever. The rest, however, is highly interesting. The idea of being children of God is certainly something that has been passed around in society since the time of the Bible. It is one of the most all-inclusive ideas about humanity. It is hard to imagine a better way of including all people under one common grouping. Children of God is the universal way of saying that we are all one. But then that next verse comes in, which seems to puncture this wonderful bubble of oneness. Quote, "God has chosen you from all the nations on the face of the earth to be his special nation." This is the classic chosen people phrase that has played such a critical historical role in both the uniqueness of the Jewish people and in fostering the power and continuance of anti-Semitism. Nobody wants to hear that one particular group is unique and better than everyone else. They certainly don't want to hear that any group has been specifically chosen by no less than God to be a special nation. This phrase, Am Segula in Hebrew, is the primary source of all that. Variations of this phrase come up 4 times in the Torah. This word Segula is always there. It is a bit of a mystery what it means. In modern Hebrew, it has gained a meaning that, while derived from the biblical meaning, is not quite the same. It currently means something like a special ability, the type of thing that might be applied to a good luck charm or a particularly effective herb. But in ancient times, it meant a treasure or an heirloom of great value. In our case, which is the original use of the word, it means that the Israelite nation was treasured to God, hence the idea of the special nation, fitting in perfectly with the familiar idea of the chosen people. It should be noted at this point that this entire chosen people idea doesn't imply any sense of being better, even though it is frequently taken to mean exactly that. Rather, it means that there is a unique relationship between the Israelite nation and God. Not a particularly surprising thing from the Bible, being as God had selected the Israelites as the group to work the events of the Bible through. But it should be also noted that this relationship is a two-way street. In addition to being treasured by God in some way, the Israelites were also held to a considerably higher standard by God, much as the possessor of something of great value would expect more out of that possession. The slightly different translation of segula as an heirloom introduces a fascinating thought. An heirloom is something that remains with the family forever. Nothing will compel that family to give it up. It is worth more than money or treasure or anything else. In a sense, it carries the family along and holds it together. The family needs it for their own identity. In our case, the family is none other than God. To keep God's identity going, God needs this heirloom. Thus, the Torah would be saying with this powerful and controversial phrase that the Israelite nation is what sustains God's name in the world. This idea has vast implications. What is it that will keep the concept of God sacred in the world? It seems to be going the way of the family and independent thinking and unique sexual genders. It seems to be going out the window year by year and day by day. What will keep this vital belief, which has survived countless wars and famines and diseases and everything else that history has thrown at it for thousands of years, alive and well? We don't know. Perhaps it is a belief whose time has passed, as many would prefer. But perhaps this isn't the case at all. Perhaps the belief in God will somehow survive this latest onslaught and emerge in some form ready to meet the next challenge. This is one of the most important matters of our times, and upon it rests, to a great degree, the future of the world. But we do have at least a partial answer to that question. The Torah explicitly called the Israelites a segula, an heirloom of the idea of God. We don't know what ideas and what beliefs or even what things will be around a few decades from now or a century from now. But we do have this as a hint. As long as there is some version of the Israelites in the world, the identity of God will still be there somewhere. When we think of all the great ideas that humanity has created through its beliefs, it is a good bet that none ranks up there with the belief in one God. Not everybody liked it, and many don't like it now, but it is indisputably among the most important. The survival of the Israelite nation, in whatever form it manifests, will keep this belief alive. Shabbat Shalom.